Ryan couldn't ignore the growing tension gnawing at him. Their savings account, once a source of pride and a symbol of shared dreams, was noticeably depleted. The vacation fund, carefully nurtured over the years for their dream getaway to Santorini, now seemed impossibly out of reach. Lisa's explanation of unexpected bills and necessary expenses didn't sit right with him. Something felt off. It started innocuously enough. A fleeting glance at their bank statements revealed inconsistent withdrawals, large amounts that didn't match their typical spending patterns. When Ryan confronted Lisa, she had brushed him off with a tired smile. "Don't worry about it," she said, her voice breezy but her eyes evasive. "It's just life being expensive, you know?" But Ryan did worry. He couldn't help it. His instincts, sharpened over years of managing their household finances, told him there was more to the story. Lisa, once an open book, now guarded her phone as if it held state secrets. She developed a habit of keeping her screen tilted away and hurrying to switch tabs whenever he walked into the room. Late one evening, after Lisa had gone to bed, Ryan decided to take a closer look. His heart pounded as he logged into their shared account. The withdrawals led to places they didn't frequent: a boutique hotel downtown, a high-end restaurant across the city. A cold dread crept up his spine. These weren't family expenses. They weren't unexpected bills. They were something else entirely. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he replayed every moment in recent months when Lisa had been vague or distant. Her sudden excuses for being late, the unexplained absences, the newly purchased designer clothes she claimed were on clearance. All of it now seemed part of a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. The breaking point came when he discovered a stack of receipts she'd left carelessly in her office. Ryan wasn't one to invade privacy, but this felt different. He unfolded the crumpled slips with trembling hands, and each one confirmed his worst fears. There were charges for spa treatments, luxury dinners for two, and stays at the boutique hotel, all under Lisa's name. The kicker? The dates aligned perfectly with times she'd claimed to be working late or out with friends. As Ryan stared at the damning evidence, a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal washed over him. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, something he thought was unshakable in their marriage. He felt the walls of his life tilting, the foundation cracking beneath him. Lisa's actions weren't just careless, they were calculated. And Ryan knew he couldn't let it slide. Determined to uncover the full extent of her deception, he resolved to confront her. But not yet. First, he needed to figure out just how deep her betrayal ran. And more importantly, he needed a plan, because if Lisa thought she could get away with this, she had underestimated the man she married. The quiet resolve that had settled over Ryan gave him clarity. He needed answers, concrete, undeniable evidence of what Lisa had done. The morning after his sleepless night, he started piecing the puzzle together. His first stop was the dining room drawer, where Lisa often stashed miscellaneous papers. Sure enough, hidden beneath expired coupons and old mail was a neat folder of receipts. Ryan's hands trembled as he flipped through them. Dinner for two at an upscale bistro? He remembered her telling him she was stuck in a late meeting that night, a stay at the downtown boutique hotel. That had been during a weekend she claimed to be visiting her sister. Each receipt was like a needle, piercing the illusion of their marriage and unraveling the fabric of trust that had once bound them. He checked their joint credit card account next. The charges matched the receipts, but there was more unaccounted for: cash withdrawals from their vacation savings. His mind raced. How long had this been going on? How much of their shared life had she quietly funneled away for her secret indulgences? But the evidence wasn't complete yet. Ryan needed more than receipts and suspicions. He needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal, even if it meant uncovering truths he wasn't ready to face. Determined, Ryan decided to search her home office more thoroughly. It felt invasive yet justified. Inside her desk drawer, he found a planner, a sleek, leather-bound book she carried everywhere. Most of its pages were filled with mundane appointments and reminders, but as he scanned further, he noticed certain dates circled and marked with cryptic notes. Dinner, J. Weekend away, J. A letter, J. A letter, J. A name, or perhaps just a letter, began to emerge from the patterns. J. It didn't take long to figure out who it might be. Jake. a man Lisa had mentioned in passing, a colleague from her department. She'd described him as harmless, a friendly face who made work easier. Ryan hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now the pieces began to fall into place. He checked Lisa's social media next, something he hadn't done in ages. Scrolling through her photos, Ryan noticed that while there were no direct signs of another man, the captions took on a subtle arrogance he hadn't noticed before. Phrases like, "living my best life" and "treat yourself because you deserve it" felt oddly pointed. More telling was the interaction with Jake's profile. Comments and likes, once innocent in his mind, now carried an air of familiarity that churned his stomach. The most damning evidence, however, came from her phone. Ryan had always trusted Lisa, but desperate times called for desperate measures. One afternoon, while Lisa showered, he opened her phone. Scrolling through her messages, he found what he dreaded. Jake's name popped up immediately. The conversation wasn't overtly explicit, but it didn't need to be. Inside jokes, nicknames, and casual mentions of "next time" painted a picture of two people far closer than mere colleagues. One thread stood out: a reservation confirmation for a hotel. It was the same boutique hotel from the receipts. The stay was scheduled for next weekend, a date she'd told Ryan she'd be visiting her sister again. His chest tightened as the truth solidified. Not only was Lisa lying, but she was still actively planning to meet Jake. The revelation hit him like a tidal wave, leaving him gasping for emotional air. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment or a fleeting mistake. This was a calculated, ongoing betrayal. He stared at the phone, the evidence burning into his mind. Ryan felt a strange mix of devastation and clarity. There was no denying what was happening anymore. It wasn't about misplaced receipts or misunderstandings. It was about a choice she had made again and again to put someone else above him. For the first time in their marriage, Ryan felt like a stranger in his own life. But amidst the storm of emotions, a single thought anchored him. Lisa had made her choices. Now, it was time for him to make his own. Ryan waited for the right moment to confront Lisa. He wanted to ensure she couldn't twist her way out of the truth. Timing was crucial. It was a Saturday afternoon when the opportunity presented itself. Lisa was lounging in the living room, scrolling through her phone, an air of contentment about her that Ryan could barely stand to look at. How could she appear so at ease when she was systematically dismantling their life together? He walked in and sat across from her, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. Its weight was symbolic, the burden of what he knew. Lisa glanced at it, her brows furrowing slightly. "What's that?" she asked, her tone casual but with a flicker of apprehension. Ryan leaned forward, his elbow on his knees, and locked eyes with her. "We need to talk," he said evenly. The calmness in his voice wasn't planned. It was the result of exhaust from nights spent wrestling with betrayal. Lisa's smile faded, replaced by a cautious expression. "About what?" Ryan opened the folder and began laying out the evidence, one piece at a time. Receipts, credit card statements, screenshots of her messages with Jake, and even the hotel reservation confirmation. He said nothing as he worked, letting the silence stretch, watching her face shift from confusion to realization. Then to panic. "Care to explain this?" Ryan finally asked, his voice low but firm. Lisa's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find words. "Ryan, this isn't what it looks like," she stammered. Her usual confidence was nowhere to be found. "Really?" Ryan replied, his tone sharp. "Because it looks like you've been lying to me for months. It looks like you've been spending our savings, the money we worked hard for, on someone else. So tell me, Lisa, what does it look like to you?" She looked down at her hands, twisting the rings on her fingers. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Ryan's laugh was humorless, a bitter sound that filled the room. "Didn't mean for it to happen? That's the best you've got? You didn't mean to book hotel rooms, spend thousands of dollars, and betray the person who's been by your side for over a decade?" Lisa's tears began to fall. "I felt trapped," she said, her voice breaking. "You're always so focused on work, on being responsible. I needed something more, something exciting." "Exciting?" Ryan's voice rose for the first time. "You needed excitement, so you decided to blow up our marriage?" "And Jake, what's he, your thrill ride? Is he worth everything we've built together, too?" Lisa wiped her tears, her expression shifting to defiance. Don't act like you're perfect, Ryan. You're distant, always preoccupied. Do you even remember the last time we had fun together? Or are you too busy being the provider to notice what's happening right in front of you? Ryan's jaw tightened, but he refused to let her deflection derail him. Don't you dare make this about me, he said coldly. I've worked my ass off to give us a good life. You want to talk about fun? Sure, let's talk about it. But don't pretend that justifies sneaking around behind my back. Lisa fell silent, her eyes darting to the folder on the table. So what now? She asked quietly, her bravado crumbling. What now? Ryan repeated, his voice quieter but no less intense. Now, you face the consequences. I've already canceled your plans with Jake. That little getaway you had scheduled, gone. I've taken control of our finances. You won't be spending another dime of our money without my say-so. Lisa's face twisted in shock. You had no right. I had every right, Ryan interrupted, his voice booming. You made this mess, Lisa. You betrayed my trust, our vows, and everything we were supposed to stand for. You don't get to cry no fair now. She looked away, her face pale. I never ever wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice barely. But you did, Ryan replied, his tone hollow. And now you have to live with it. I'm done being the one holding this marriage together while you tear it apart. Lisa tried to speak again, but Ryan held up his hand. I'm leaving, he said firmly. I've booked a one-way ticket for myself, somewhere we always dreamed of going, together. But now? Now it's just me. You can explain to everyone why this marriage fell apart. I'm done. He stood and began walking toward the door. Lisa called after him, her voice desperate. Ryan, please, we can fix this. And stopped, but didn't turn around. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided excitement was more important than loyalty. With that, he walked out, leaving Lisa alone with the evidence of her betrayal. As the door closed behind him, Ryan felt a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was one he would walk with his head held high. For the first time in months, he felt in control of his life again. Ryan sat in the airport lounge, his one-way ticket clenched in his hand. The destination felt bittersweet. A place they'd once dreamed of exploring together, now tainted by betrayal. Yet, it wasn't just about the destination anymore. It was about reclaiming his dignity and moving forward. The events of the past few weeks played out in his mind like a stormy montage. Lisa's tearful confessions, her half-hearted attempts to justify her actions, and the weight of the betrayal still lingered. But Ryan had made his decision. This was his turning point. A moment to break free from the toxic wreckage of their marriage and redefine his life. It had taken every ounce of self-control to cancel Lisa's planned getaway with Jake. As he navigated the online booking site, a grim satisfaction settled over him. He erased their reservation with the click of a button and redirected the funds to book his own flight. The irony wasn't lost on him. The trip they'd once fantasized about as a couple would now be his solo journey. Back home, Ryan left a carefully written note on the kitchen counter. It was succinct but piercing. He outlined everything he discovered, the receipts, the messages, the lies, and made it clear that he was done. Actions have consequences, he'd written in bold letters, a phrase that echoed in his mind as he packed his bag. Lisa had returned home to find the note waiting for her, the damning evidence neatly stacked beside it. Ryan wasn't there to witness her reaction, but he could imagine it, the dawning horror, the panic, the realization that he wasn't bluffing. She had underestimated him, taking for granted his patience and devotion. Now she would face the fallout alone. As Ryan waited for his flight, his phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Lisa. At first they were desperate pleas. Ryan, please call me. We can fix this. Then came the deflections. This isn't all my fault. We both made mistakes. And finally the anger. You're overreacting. You can't just run away like this. He didn't reply to any of them. There was nothing left to say. What struck Ryan most was the shift in his emotions. The rage that had consumed him in the beginning was giving way to something quieter but more profound. A sense of freedom. For the first time in years, he felt unshackled, untethered from a relationship that had been eroding under the surface for far longer than he'd realized. At the gate, he glanced at the couples around him, holding hands, leaning on each other, sharing quiet conversations. It stung to see what he'd lost, but it also reminded him of what he deserved: a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Lisa's betrayal had been the final straw, but in hindsight, there had been cracks in their marriage long before Jake entered the picture. He couldn't fix what was already broken, nor did he want to. The flight itself felt like a transition, a liminal space between the life he was leaving behind and the new chapter awaiting him. As the plane ascended, Ryan looked out the window at the shrinking landscape below. It struck him how small everything appeared from up here. Problems, heartaches, even betrayal. Perspective was a powerful thing. When he arrived at his destination, the vibrant coastal town he'd always dreamed of visiting, Ryan felt a surge of exhilaration. The turquoise waters, the bustling markets, the scent of salt and citrus in the air. It was everything he had imagined and more. He checked into a modest but charming seaside villa, a place he had chosen deliberately to reflect his new ethos: simplicity and authenticity. Over the next few days, Ryan immersed himself in the culture. He wandered cobblestone streets, sampled local delicacies, and watched sunsets that painted the horizon in hues of gold and crimson. Each experience felt like a small victory, a reminder that life could still be beautiful even after heartbreak. Lisa, meanwhile, was unraveling. Mutual friends reached out to Ryan with snippets of gossip. She had confided in a few people, spinning the narrative to paint herself as a misunderstood victim, but the truth had a way of surfacing, and her attempts to garner sympathy were met with more scrutiny than support. Jake, predictably, distanced himself as soon as the fallout began. He was a man who thrived on thrill, not accountability, and Lisa's crumbling world wasn't something he wanted to inherit. Quote, "This place was rotting me out, and the night I got hurt," unquote, he said over the phone. Ryan didn't revel in her misery, but he couldn't ignore the satisfaction of knowing she was facing the consequences of her choices. Her betrayal had been an earthquake that shook the foundation of their marriage, but not. He was the one left standing in the rubble. On his last evening in the coastal town, Ryan stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed below, powerful and relentless, a reminder of nature's indifference to human woes. In that moment, he felt a sense of closure. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined him. He had reclaimed his autonomy, his self-respect, and as he turned to leave, his phone buzzed one last time. It was Lisa. He stared at the screen for a long moment before silencing it and slipping it back into his pocket. The chapter was closed. It was time to move forward. In the weeks following Ryan's departure, the ripples of his actions began to spread. Lisa was left to confront the wreckage of her choices in a way she never anticipated. Ryan's note, stark and unyielding in its clarity, became a bitter reminder of what she had lost. She had underestimated him, assuming his quiet demeanor was a sign of weakness. But Ryan, meanwhile, embraced his newfound independence with cautious optimism. His solo vacation was transformative, a blend of soul-searching and liberation. He found solace in the small moments, standing barefoot on a sandy beach, savoring the taste of freshly caught seafood and watching the sunset dissolve into a canvas of stars. Each experience felt like a step toward reclaiming his identity. Back home, Lisa's life was unraveling. Word of the affair spread quickly among their social circle. Ryan hadn't set out to ruin her reputation, but the truth had a way of coming out. Friends who once admired Lisa's charisma began to distance themselves. The whispered conversations and judgmental glances became impossible to ignore. Jake, her lover and co-conspirator, proved to be as unreliable as Ryan had suspected. Faced with the fallout, Jake retreated, leaving Lisa to bear the brunt of the consequences alone. His excuses were as shallow as his commitment. "This isn't what I signed up for," he'd said before disappearing. Lisa found herself abandoned, betrayed, by the very person for whom she had risked everything. The financial strain became another blow. With Ryan in control of their shared accounts, Lisa struggled to maintain her lifestyle. Bills piled up, and the luxury she once took for granted slipped through her fingers. Her attempts to reach out to Ryan, first with anger, then with apologies, were met with silence. She realized too late that he was truly gone, not just physically, but emotionally. For Ryan, the distance from his old life allowed him to reflect on his future. He started journaling, something he hadn't done since his college days. The act of putting his thoughts on paper was cathartic, helping him process the anger, hurt, and even the lingering love he had once felt for Lisa. He didn't shy away from the pain. It was part of his journey. But he also began reconnecting with old friends and hobbies. On a whim, he signed up for a cooking class, rediscovering his love for creating meals from scratch. It was a small, almost trivial act, but it symbolized his commitment to rebuilding himself, one step at a time. Ryan's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Friends who had watched him endure years of quiet struggle were inspired by his resilience. Some reached out, offering support and encouragement, while others sought advice for their own troubled relationships. Ryan didn't consider himself an expert, but his journey gave him a perspective he was willing to share. As for Lisa, she eventually hit rock bottom. The house felt emptier without Ryan's presence, and the silence became oppressive. She replayed their last conversation in her mind, haunted by the finality of his words. Her attempts to rebuild were fraught with challenges, and she couldn't escape the shadow of her own decision. One day, she tried reaching out to Ryan again, not to plead for his return, but to apologize. She sent a long, heartfelt message acknowledging her betrayal and the pain she had caused. Ryan read it, but didn't reply. He didn't need to. The apology was more for her than for him. Months later, Ryan returned from his travels not to reconcile with Lisa, but to close the chapter entirely. He finalized the divorce, dividing their assets with a calm detachment that surprised even him. Lisa's attempts to engage him in conversation were met with polite indifference. He had moved on, and he made it clear that she needed to do the same. The final chapter of their marriage ended not with a dramatic confrontation, but with quiet resolution. Ryan walked away from the courthouse feeling lighter, unburdened by the weight of what once was. He didn't hate Lisa. He simply no longer loved her. The story of Ryan and Lisa became a cautionary tale among their friends, a reminder that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. For Ryan, it was also a story of resilience and self-discovery. He had been knocked down by betrayal, but had risen stronger, wiser, and more determined to live life on his own terms. As he stepped into the next phase of his life, Ryan felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to embrace it, knowing he had reclaimed not only his freedom, but also his self-worth.